Hello, everyone. My name is recording in progress. My name is Sergio. It's a pleasure to be here. My name Sergio Cavada from California. I graduated from the University of California in 2020 with a degree in music, my bachelor's. And I'm a composer and musician. I play keyboard and percussion when I'm in the orchestra, guitar when I'm in the mariachi, bass when I'm in the rock band, and I'm kind of a musical chameleon in a sense. I do, bits here and there. I just finished a show in Sonoma of Sunset Boulevard where I was playing first keyboard, which was a fabulous return to the theater after so long. And yeah, so here in front of me, I have some of my latest composition for orchestra, or for wind ensemble, I should say, the Peruvian Suite in 4 movements on big paper. And I can play a little sample from that, from the 4th movement, titled the Vals Criollo, or the Creole Waltz of Peru. And so I'm sharing the computer sound. I'm going to hit play in a few seconds, so don't be alarmed if there's suddenly music in the air. Okay, here we go. So that was a little sample of the chorus section from the waltz of the final movement. And then, of course, there are other movements in there. There's a marinera, which is a coastal dance of Peru. The second one is a fantasia on themes from ancient archaeological instruments. The third movement is a huayno, which is a mountain dance of Peru. And then the fourth is the valse, the waltz. And then a future project of mine, is a very ambitious project, is an opera in the Quechua language, which is an indigenous language of Peru. And I have the libretto right here, all of the words in a foreign language. So that's what's on my plate right now. And then later tonight, I'm rehearsing with the UCBS, or the UC Berkeley Symphony Orchestra, playing cymbals and the like. So I'll turn it over to the next panelist. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sergio. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing. Next up, we'll have La Vispera, and I will share my screen to show some of their artwork.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Jimenez. I am originally from Colombia, Bogota, Colombia, and I moved to Miami, Florida when I was 13 years old. I lived there for about 14 years, and 3 years ago, we moved together to St. Louis. I worked for 8 years as an art director and set designer, and we're currently working together as La Vispera, making stained glass windows out of single-use plastic.
And my name is Alejandro Franco. Hello, everyone. I'm also from Colombia. I moved here when I was 18 years old. I also moved to Miami. I lived there for 20 years. And since 2003, I've been making sculptures mostly out of found materials. I really like finding poetic potential in discarded materials. That's like my main goal as an artist. And for the last 3 years, as she was mentioning, we've been working as La Vispera together, making these stained glass works out of single-use plastic that you're seeing in the screen. And that's what we have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if you go to the link we have for this event listing on our website, you can also link to their website where you can see more of their artwork. Thank you. Next, we have Lenora Quinones.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lenora Quinones. I'm a first-gen Nicaraguan. I got my bachelor's in Latin American Studies from the University of Southern California, and I just graduated with my master's in public diplomacy. So the artwork that I do is just kind of after a long day and kind of winding down, and it like takes like some like inspiration from like Central American like primitivism and the way that they engage with art, and also anything that just kind of comes to mind. And it's a way just, you know, self-expression and like think of ways that I can like better my artwork. So I just write or draw something on a sketchbook, but also I take a picture of the place that I did it. So that all of this is just posted on Instagram, and I do it like infrequently, but as it comes. And it's been, I think, really good to explore these different like facets of what it means to be like artistic, especially with like all the time given during COVID. But yeah, that's just a little bit of the work that I've done. And these are again off of like Central American primitivism. Yeah, sorry, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you, Lenora. And last but not least, we have Xavier Gomez.
All right, thank you, Anna. So I'm excited to be here. Welcome, everyone. So this is some of my work. I work currently as a after-school program administrator, but in my just kind of free time, I'm really passionate about art. So this is an example of a graphic design that I did based on a picture that I had taken with my DSLR camera. I'm really into photography, really into video production, and also digital design. This is a skateboarding photo that I had taken, an action shot at well, I'm not going to get into the kind of specifics of the skateboarding, but that's something that I'm really passionate about as well as skateboarding, which in a way is kind of like art because you're looking for certain places where you can do skateboarding tricks where it's going to kind of sort of complement the architecture, and also thinking of creative tricks that you can do that someone else hasn't done before. So it's always about creativity. It's not like a sport in the sense of like basketball where you just kind of make the ball into the hoop. It's more about you could go to this exact spot and do like a million different tricks there. And then just looking at it itself as kind of architecture or artistically created, the architecture itself. And then so you're kind of complementing that with the skateboarding. So I dabble in a lot of things, also music production, drawing, sound design, just things like that. But specifically what I'm most passionate about is skateboarding, photography, video production. And that's it for my introduction.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing. And if anyone has any more questions about each artist and the art that they have, that's something you'd be more than welcome to ask during the Q&A session. Well, we'll get started now with our first question. Each question will be discussed for about 10 minutes each. We'll hopefully be able to hear from, if not everyone per question, at least hear from everyone throughout the discussion. So without further ado, the first question that we have tonight is, most studies show that surroundings are a huge influence on our taste in music and art. Do you agree with that? How much did your background influence your work?
I can start off with this one. So I just started like, what's it called, drawing and painting again during the pandemic time. And I think what really influenced me was like my surroundings, but also just where I was. So I was staying with a friend whose parents were Central American too, Salvadoran descent. And in their house, they had a lot of like artwork by Fernando Lort. So that kind of influenced a lot of the work that I was doing, and kind of again entering into like, what does Central American art look like? Because I see maybe other forms, but not this one particularly, or even Nicaraguan art. And so that kind of influenced it. And also just like a lot of the work that I do, I like to just kind of doodle, and at one point or other something comes to my mind that like, oh, this kind of looks like a bird, or this looks like a house. But yeah, I think that's something that kind of influenced my starting point anyways.
Well, what I like to say is, you know how we belong to nature, and somehow everything that is part of nature we really like. Like when we look at animals, skins, patterns, the colors of different birds, like we're always, somehow it's really difficult that you see an animal and you feel that there was like a problem with the design. Like we like just everything, and same thing with plants and same things. I know this is a little out of topic, but I feel like it also kind of connects with it, because it's like, so does it mean that we like everything that we belong to, like inherently, you know what I mean? That's what I want to say.
If I may chime in, I think broadly I can agree with the concept of the surroundings having a grand influence on your on your tastes. But and I'm kind of hard pressed to find a counter argument against that. One of the things I can think of is that everybody has innately a musical sense, or everybody has innately an artistic or visual sense. I mean, for the most part. And so innately, people will want to make music or express themselves in a certain way, whether they're in the middle of the jungle in the Amazon or if they're in New York, for example. But then each surroundings, those two different worlds, you know, lead to different possibilities and different ways, different outcomes. Another thing that I think about as a sort of counter argument to this is the exploration of the new, and being in an environment that is all one certain thing, but trying to create something that is different than that. And sometimes that can be hard to break out of. Maybe it's like, you know, trailblazing, making a new path, a new name, a new genre, a new sound or something. So these are sort of the things that I think about when I'm trying to formulate a counter argument against this, but I really have to say that the environment has a huge influence on it. I'll leave it open to anybody else, but you know, I can continue going on. You know.
Do you all feel at all that the environment that you continue to grow in as you become adults has an impact on you, or do you feel like once you're out of sort of like puberty or those like fundamental ages like middle school that you're kind of stuck with your influences?
I'll jump in on this one. No, I definitely think your art and your taste in art, which also is what you gravitate towards with what you're making, that changes as you get older. Now, it's definitely influenced from an early age, and that's kind of the inception of it. Like, if you're looking in the context of music, if you grow up listening to rap music, your taste in rap music might change, like who you listen to, the types of artists. But you're probably still gonna like rap music. You might start liking other genres as well, but you're probably gonna always retain that initial kind of thing that caught your interest and got you interested in that type of art. So when I look at it with skateboarding, for me, skateboarding kind of has similar genres in a way, where there's different styles of skateboarding, some that's considered more technical, some that's more like stunt driven, and you can kind of gravitate towards one or the other. And for me, I kind of was earlier on more interested in the technical stuff, and then as I got older, I got more interested in like the stunt style of skateboarding, and wanted to document that with photography. So I do feel like you grow, your taste grows as you get older, and it's definitely influenced by your surroundings, and it's not something that you're just stunted at wherever you started when you were coming of age.
Yeah, I feel kind of at a point where I've taken a lot, as a sponge, I've taken a lot of influences in my past, and now I'm ready to like forge a new way forward. That's kind of where I'm at. But I think that this question, this topic really has a lot to relate with La Vispera's art. And I think it's super cool how they're taking materials from their surroundings to create a form of art that usually is reserved for glass and for churches and that sort of thing, and taking that environment and kind of making a fusion out of it. And that's what I think is so cool about their art.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I just feel that there is so much stuff, and there's so much stuff that is being made and built. And also this material that we use, which is all packaging materials, shopping bags, it's always like thrown away in such a pristine state. You know what I mean? Like you open something and it's just brand new. You know what I mean? This packaging is just brand new, and you just put it straight in the garbage, and it just go to a landfill where it's never gonna decompose, you know? So the fact that you can give it a little more of a lifetime to that material, that it will just end up polluting our earth, is just such a task, you know?
Yeah, if I
Beautiful.
understood it correctly, sorry. It's
Go
just
ahead,
like
go ahead,
different
please.
stages of your life, correct? And if that influences like how your artwork develops.
Yes, yeah. So essentially, is it something where your taste and your view of the world is kind of not necessarily stunted through puberty, but where that's where you're going to take your biggest influences, or can that grow and change? An example of like kind of looking at the environment and landfills, that might be not something that you're thinking of when you're very young, but as you get older and as you see that grow, you're kind of like, this is impacting me in a way that it might not have when I was a child.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think that like throughout the different like stages in our life, we can interpret things from a different perspective. And like you're saying, so at the very beginning, it's like just looking at it, but then afterwards, it's about like maybe coming to internalize it or coming to an emotion about it. Because I feel like sometimes when you're doing art, you kind of just do it and maybe you look at it and it looks nice, but then maybe after a while, it starts to gain more meaning. Like what were the emotions going on behind it? What is this like pose or what does this strike in this composition mean? And so I think it also has to just do a lot with like the emotional component as well, when you're doing like whatever artwork and how that comes out in the different stages of your life. Yeah.
We have about a minute left on this question. If anyone has anything else.
I do have to say that very, very early on in my infancy, and perhaps growing up as a child, those musical experiences have had a profound effect on me, and perhaps on a level that I cannot even fathom, that will continue on for the rest of my life. So I'm just noting that, and taking that into account. But I really want to like break free, and I want to create something new that's never been seen before. I feel like a seed, and I'm just waiting to like blossom into something amazing one day. So yeah, that's just my personal feelings about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for very thoughtful answers. Very good discussion. For our second question here, we're going to kind of expand on that idea of your environment influencing you. I kind of want to hear your thoughts on something that I've read, that there's this perspective that say that there's no originality in art, that everything has kind of been done, and we're kind of building upon things that we've already seen, things that we've already heard, things that we've already experienced, and that all art is influenced by further art. Do you guys agree with this idea? Do you disagree, and why?
I believe that influences have always been present, and everyone that we consider nowadays that it's like a great painter, a musician, and that we think that they're very original, at one point they had their own influences that led them to create their greatest creations.
I think that we are one single thing. I think that we all human beings, and even nature and animals and everything, is just one single organism. So when from our perspective, we see a lot of individuality, because we're so close to each other. So we kind of differentiate one from another, you know what I mean? But I feel like if you look at it, if you step up, like if you just look at the planet, it just looks like this one thing that is moving and this one thing that is developing in a certain way. So that just kills the whole idea of originality right there, because I feel like we are all, and yes, we are all trying to like channel like our emotions and our experience here in this planet, and so it comes up kind of original and or fresh anyway. But I just think if we're all part of the same thing, there's no such a thing as originality.
I think I fall in the middle here, because I do agree with that all art is influenced by the past, and there's always elements of previous art that you can find in current art. But, and not to nitpick, but if I look at like Andy Warhol's like Campbell's Soup art, there's no way that is like not original compared to what came before it, because you literally could not have been doing that in the before Campbell's Soup was existed. So I mean, there's just certain examples that you can kind of point to of art that really did push the envelope and went in a completely different direction, that didn't have such a strong connection to the art that preceded it. But I do think there's still, even within that, I mean, I'm not, a big art history major, so I don't know. I'm sure there's something that you could point to that did connect Andy Warhol's, or that was a big influence on Andy Warhol. But it did seem like his work was very different from what came before it, at least from my perspective. And I can think of some other examples, but that's one that just comes to mind most prominently.
I see what you're saying, but that's because Andy Warhol is the one that got all the visibility. But if we were to like really scrutinize the art history and like look around at the people that didn't really make it, like the way he did it, there's probably a lot of that Andy Warhol pick up from. And of course, we're all like trying to be original in some way, because otherwise that's the whole idea of being creative, right? It's like to come up with something fresh, something that people will be surprised and inspired by. But so I have nothing against originality. I'm just saying that I rather think as we're all building together rather than I'm trying to stand out on my own. You know what I mean?
If I could add on that, Yak, I think I'd be of the mind that like it's all art, right? Like even if it comes from something that's already existing, it's a form of expression, and like I would like to see it more as a horizontal thing, but I feel like in the way that just things are structured, it's like this person is seen more because they had the right connections or whatever, and then that becomes the most prominent work. But I think I'd be more of the mind that, all art is art, even if it comes from something else, you're reinterpreting it into your own, and giving it out to the world. It's just like, how do you give like props to people when you do, and all those sort of things. But I would be more of the mind that like trying to keep art like horizontal, and that everyone is like kind of helping each other develop their own like, signature self.
So I think about this somewhat often. I have a lot to think about this, or a lot to say about it. I'll start with music, because that's my field. In the orchestra, in musical theory, there are so many paths you can do. You can go from this note to this note to this note to this note. But then the last 100 years in the symphonic literature, or in music, printed music, the literature has been done again and again and again and again. Or like it's, you have a sound in your head, a melody in your head, and you imagine it's something else has been done before you 150 years ago that's even better than what you could think of in the first place. And that's a challenge. And there's a composer, Xenakis, I forget his first name, but he made a point to only create compositions that has never been heard before. And so his music is extremely avant-garde, very forward, very alien, I guess you could say, very new. It sounds unlike anything you've heard before. Like every violin is like going crazy on their strings, and it like multiply that by 70, and then you have the percussion doing weird hits here and there. It's all over the place. And so that is sort of the originality that we strive for. Like there are examples of that here and there, but it is a little bit hard to break out of the mold. But then again, being in that mold is not a bad thing either. It's not bad to recreate something that has been done before, in my opinion. Like this Peruvian suite here that I've done, it's kind of on the pastiche side, if I may say so myself, of different dances that I've heard before. And the originality behind it is the fact that I myself went through the effort to create it all, and to put it all together, and to formulate and calculate every single little thing that is going on. And so that is kind of the originality. If you go into the rap art world, or the rap music world, you have people creating variations or elaborations on top of beats or samples of music that has been done before. And so that is, again, taking the individuality route into the originality sort of thing. In the art world, you have new pigments, like I believe it's Vanta Black, am I right? That's like the blackest of black pigments. And I believe there was this artist, Kapoor, I want to say, who like patented it, and now it's like safeguarding it from the rest of the world, and no other artist can use this color or something. And then there's also the pinkest pink. And so all of this is based off of technology and pigment technology. So I mean, you can say things aren't original because there were scientists who developed this, and so you're bringing science into this and technology. And of course, civilization is things built on top of each other. So there's kind of some leeway into originality versus, being more conservative. But of course, this is art, and it's a wonderfully gray area that we can thrive in. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry. We've about a minute and a half left. If anyone else had anything else they wanted to add.
I think it's more of like a question, but it's like, is the idea of originality really important, or what goes behind the idea of like to be original? Is it just like giving respect to like dated what you're doing, or is it to like just hone into your own like originality? Like why does originality have to play a role? What's the importance of it, and why can't art just be art?
I would say it has to do with the individual, and also to a certain degree marketability and the relation between one's work versus the greater body of work that has been done before, and trying to make a name for yourself, and putting yourself out there, being like, hey, I have this brand new special thing, come and get it, sort of thing. That's one way of looking at it, in my opinion. Also to highlight the endeavors of the artist in creating that work.
So I would agree with that if you're looking at art as if art is your career, then yeah, everything that you're saying is 100% valid. If you're looking at it just as a form of creative expression, completely not considering the audience, but just considering the work that you're creating, then I would disagree. I would say that art is more about, the originality is more about creating something that's meaningful to you, and something that's unique to your experiences, in the sense of it could already exist, but if you're just not aware of it, then it's original to you. And that does make it original, in my opinion, as well. Because that happens a lot, where you'll have two artists that come up with the same sort of concept, and then there's that battle for who came up with it first. But realistically, they could have just arrived at that same idea with the same influences, but just not necessarily being influenced by one or another. And if you look at it from that perspective, then I would say that you're still being original, even if you weren't necessarily the first person to come up with that idea. Someone could have came up with it yesterday, you came up with it today, but you didn't know that they did. That's still original from my perspective.
Very good points.
Convergent evolution, right?
Yeah. I feel like this is something that definitely gets often debated. As mentioned with Anish Kapoor and Vanta Black, highly controversial, him copywriting a color that was that was a pretty big deal. Well, moving on to question number 3. According to The Atlantic, out of the 2 million art graduates in the nation, only 200,000 or 10% earn their living primarily as artists. The idea of a starving artist has been around for as long as I can remember. Is art of any type something you can make a living off of, or do you think all artists need to have some type of other gig?
May I start with this one? Now, I don't know many of the big elites in Hollywood, who are running Spotify or iTunes or the like, but I'm sure that they can make a good chunk of change out of the usage of these software platforms. So it might not be directly the art itself making the money, but people's access to the art or some other way of doing things. To change gears, in my perspective, in my career, I want to be as well-rounded as possible and do a bunch of different things. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a little bit of a chameleon. So it's a bunch of different streams of income for me personally. So I do teach, I do play, I do write, I do fix instruments. And so it's kind of a whole bunch of different things. And now that the pandemic is kind of, well, it's not over, but now that things are reopening, I'm starting to get more on the ball after graduation in terms of a music career that is actually being more and more lucrative. So I think it's kind of, you have to have different streams of income, at least as a musician. And I'm not against having a 9-to-5 job or a different kind of job that's outside of the musical field. And as for people who do art on the side, of course, there are a bunch of people who say they want to be a music major, but like it's not the easiest path to take for a career. It's something that I would advise people do vocationally, and to do so to fulfill their emotional, needs, or maybe, just let them have a release from something that's more day to day. So there's that concept too. So I'll leave it open to the other panelists for now.
I'm very blessed because I have a part-time job as a designer, and there is a lot of creativity involved. So it feels like I'm getting paid to be an artist, even though my name is it's not nowhere like in everything I do for them. But on the other hand, I have enough time to work on our project together. But I will say that in my experience, working without that part-time job that I have, we wouldn't be able to just make a living out of our own project.
Yes, I feel the same. I mean, it's really hard to make it as an artist. I mean, you see many successful visual artists, but it's just really difficult, Like I started going to school, and then I saw that I was accumulating student loans, and then I was gonna graduate with like a fine arts degree, and what is that even gonna do to, you know what I mean, to like start making money and paying for those student loans. And I really like going to school, and when I like a class, I'm like, I become friends with the professor. I really enjoy being in class, but I just didn't want to have that debt. Like I'm super afraid of debt, so I just didn't go to school anymore, and then I just started finding jobs. And then I realized that I guess what I had to do was just find jobs that I like, or jobs that I feel that somehow they complement my career as a visual artist. So like right now I work for the St. Louis Art Museum, which I'm not making any art there, but at least I'm surrounded by all of these wonderful objects that not only like inspire me, but like really challenge me and like make me think of like all these wonderful possibilities. So it's hard to make it as an artist, but there are ways to like trick the system a little bit.
Sorry. For this question, I can't contribute too much because I just do the drawings and I post it to Instagram, and I do it again as like a form of self-expression. But what I do find really curious is that we see art and creativity on a lot of the things that we interact with, like podcasts or music or TV shows or whatever, even just walking outside. But it's just always really hard and disheartening to like, we consume all this art, but that same work isn't being like given back to artists. And hopefully in the future, like seeing that grow into like venues that do help them out. But yeah, we do consume a lot of art, and I feel like there should be more in place to support artists. And I feel like that's something that social media has been trying to like open up with, I think, with like, Instagram, Facebooks, Twitters. Excuse me, I'm old, Twitters. And trying to kind of like democratize like art in that way and make it more accessible that way. Yeah.
Xavier, do you have anything to chip in before I continue on? Okay. So I remember seeing on Facebook, because I have a whole bunch of artist friends, of course, and I saw a meme or something that said like it was like a general or something, and he was like, I went to the academy to study war so that my son could learn how to study art. And so it's kind of, I think it's like a side product of a society in a way. You have your essential things like the sciences and stuff, and law and order and whatever, and then you have art on the side. And then I also think about in my classes in opera, I remember my professor just straight up telling us, operas do not make money. An opera is an expenditure, point blank. Like there has been no operas from the Metropolitan Opera in New York that has actually made a profit. Everything is, just exorbitantly spending on musicians and costumes and sets and lights and, bookings for theater venues and all this. But what for? for the culture, and that's kind of the core of the opera. It's the culture behind it, and the language, and the heritage, and stuff like that. Turning to opera, the Metropolitan Opera in New York recently premiered their first opera by an African-American composer. It's Fire Shut Up in My Bones. And they're going to live stream it in October, the 23rd or something, in cinemas around the country. Anyways, I just thought that was interesting. I'm not sponsored by the Metropolitan Opera. I would love to, but no. So just those ideas. I'm just throwing those out there.
We have about a couple minutes left, and okay, sorry, someone had unmuted by accident. So something I wanted to throw that's similar, or kind of in the same vein as this question. We can all kind of usually agree that sure, life is not fair, but does it feel fair that everyone on the whole planet consumes art, whether or not they respect it as a profession? Everyone consumes art, but art really doesn't make a lot of money. Does that feel fair? Do you ever feel sort of like, you know, why bother? Or does it kind of like, how does that make you feel that we all consume it, but the money's not really there at all?
I think it's really sad. It's really sad that our society doesn't see culture as like an important part of our patrimony. So like as an artist, people expect you to do everything because they're giving you an exhibition space. So now you have to bring the work, you have to install it, you have to paint the walls, you have to fix the holes, you have to do everything just because you're giving like the privilege of having the wall so you can display, you know, and then you don't make any money, you're just doing it in the amount, like 90% of the opportunities that are out there for artists, they don't give anything to artists. The only thing they're giving to the artist is a wall so you can hang your work, you know what I mean? So that's like, and then you should feel grateful because that's what you're getting. And so it's just sad, you know, that we live in a society that, like, if you look at like the defense budget and the culture budget, it's just gonna be really sad, you know. That's it.
Well, I don't think it's healthy to over despair about that. Although you do have to acknowledge that discrepancy sometimes. And I think it kind of goes down to the individual independent contractor and the negotiations between the parties responsible for paying and such. Like, I don't do any more gigs that just pay me in tips, like, because I have to prepare in advance and I have to practice the repertoire and I have to dress up and be there on time and everything, and the gas money and all that. So I just don't do any more gigs like that. Maybe when I was younger for fun, but so yeah, it's up to individual negotiation. And I know in Hollywood, people just give a flat rate for like the service for creating the score and parts for music for movies or TV, and then that's it. And sometimes the orchestrators are not really credited. I think credits is another thing, like credits in the movie after the movie or whatever. That's another incentive to work for, to get your name on the screen versus being paid or something. Like I said, I'm not really that savvy on all that, but yeah. And then on the maintenance side of instruments, like piano maintenance and stuff, usually people give a respectable amount of money for that. It's a bit more of a mechanical thing, in maintenance and repair. And so that's another good source of income for, yeah. I think Lenora wanted to say something.
So this is kind of related to like my degree in public diplomacy. So a lot of the work that is being done in public diplomacy is to, like, you know, connect people together. Like, let's say we have like a really bad like relationship with Mexico, and so we engage in kind of like soft power or cultural programs to kind of garner, you know, respectability on both sides. And I bring this all up to say it's super important when it comes to diplomatic relations to have artists, but at the same time, these artists aren't being paid for their work. So I'm sorry, it's not like giving another point of view, but just kind of seeing that art really impacts, you know, like diplomacy, like political relationships with people. And to still see that it's not being respected, even at PD as like its own profession is not seen at the top, even though the United States very much needs like a PR redo over. defense is still over public diplomacy, it's still over culture, and it's still over artists. And just in general, I'm going to point out to COVID again is like, what did people turn to when there was nothing else to do, which was their screens, which was podcasts and all these things. And it's really important to realize like how art really helps us find our own and be our own, and it should be recognized that much more.
That's a really, really great points. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying about public diplomacy. Something I think about a lot is a lot of the tense relations with the United States and Cuba. But Cuba's like national ballet is really highly regarded. Singer Celia Cruz, you know, they're Gloria Estefan. These are people who, you know, very easily can come here and work and everything like that. So it definitely is super important to relations having some type of art and culture. It's like that exchange. But then as you say, yeah, it's still not, even they get here and it's still not as respected. It's just a little bit higher respected than if they were just a normal like immigrant or something like that. So we kind of already, for our next question, we've already kind of talked about this a little bit. It's already kind of been brought up. But attending school for your craft, do you feel like it is necessary? Do you feel like it helps? Does it hinder when we talk about originality? Do you feel like if you're taught music theory in school, then suddenly you're, you know, a slave to it? Or if you're taught, you know, art styles, you have to follow those. How do you feel about attending school for your craft? Sergio, you were like itching to.
Yeah, I am. I'm trying to see if anybody else wanted to speak up first. Okay, so for music, of course, you don't have to go to college to make it big. For musical production and stuff, you know, you don't really have to go to college for that. For stuff, but I would argue that for playing a lot of instruments, that having a teacher or somebody to teach you along the way is actually very key. I would be extremely surprised if any of these electronic music producers, you know, never looked on YouTube for a tutorial of how to do this in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever. So of course there's always going to be somebody teaching you music. It's extremely difficult to like make it as an instrumentalist without having lessons in your instrument. And that is one of the things about music that is kind of a tradition, the tradition of having a teacher and, you know, them showing you the way, and bad habits and, you know, techniques and stuff, and all that goes together with it. To tackle the other point about, you know, what you brought up about music theory and stuff. Yes, there is a certain pedagogical approach that is somewhat negative, I would say, in which you have these rules of counterpoint and choral 4-part harmony that doesn't come up very often if you're in certain styles of music, but and you have to follow them or you're marked down or whatever. And I was always kind of the rebel in school. I would try to make the chords major when they were minor, or minor when they were major, and see what I could get away with. And by doing that, I actually learned a lot more of the different harmonic functions that were outside of the usual sphere that they advise in. But once you get to a certain point in your studies, if you deal with this for the right amount of time, you will find that these are not rules, but rather they are guidelines to help, or you can completely ignore them and make whatever you want, really. And a lot of composers, especially in the 20th century composers, they really just eschewed the rules and they forge their own path, which again is kind of that originality sort of thing. And you also find that the composers of the classical period did not really know these rules also. Well, maybe they did. There were old treatises, but sometimes these rules that the professors, you know, they adhere to were just observations and analyzations of those works from the quote unquote great composers. So yeah, that's kind of what I was going for. But I'm glad I got that off my chest. Of course, it may be different in the visual arts, and so maybe the other panelists can have a word about that.
Well, I'll say, since art is such a subjective thing, then people if you go to really good schools, then you have a good chance to get like good opportunities, because curators will be like, oh, he went to a good school, so whatever he's doing is good, you know, like, or, but if you did not go to school, then your work has to be it's got to be like undeniably good, you know, or it has to be outstanding to the point where it's like, I mean, so it is a bigger challenge if you didn't go to school, but it is a good challenge. So
I agree with Alejandro that it is like a bigger challenge not going to school. In my experience, I went to school for fashion design, and I just did an associate degree because of the high amount of debt that I was putting myself into. And nowadays, I don't do anything that's related to fashion. I am more into visual art and set design and animation, and I never took any classes for none of them.
I haven't taken any classes for drawing or anything like that. But I mean, I'm not super like professional, but just to figure out like shading or like what's color theory and things like that, maybe I see the use there. But I feel like it's something that you can very much like teach yourself. But of course, it's always great to have somebody who can guide, who knows more of the ins and outs, I would say.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I did take some classes in high school, but I didn't enjoy them because I felt like they very much wanted to give you like a paint by numbers kind of approach to art, as opposed to really having you explore your own artistic expression. So that's what made me not really consider pursuing art in the higher education. But I do see the benefit in it, because I do think that, like Alejandro said, it could help with just making the connections. I mean, that's what higher education is about anyway, regardless of what you're studying, even if you're studying business, economics, whatever, those people that you're meeting in school can help you to get your gig afterwards. So for that reason, I can see there being a benefit. But as far as what you're actually learning there, not that there's no benefit to it, but like Lenora said, you could learn that through a YouTube tutorial or something like that, potentially, and save yourself the debt. And then also not find yourself beholden to whatever they're forcing you to practice that you may not be as interested in. You can kind of just freely explore whatever your heart desires, I guess. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Kind of to add to that point, like randomly, I was taking like a ceramics class in high school. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh,
Just say 5-minute mark. Just say 5-minute mark.
Gotcha. I was taking a ceramics class in high school, and it was fun. I really liked doing it. I've never worked with like clay before, but I didn't like the class because you had to meet these deadlines, and I'm like, whoa, man, I can't roll this out straight. Like, give me time. And so I felt like everything was really rushed. So in that aspect, if like I'm feeling rushed or like you have to do things like that, I don't like that. I'd rather like self-teach and like go on my own and figure things out like that, because that way I can get the best results without like the pressure and stuff.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I do not like to compose with a deadline. I mean, of course you have to sometimes, but I would rather just let it come to me naturally. And I like to take my time with it to make a really good, end product. To echo off of the previous comments about, you can get your gigs from people who you meet in university. I am totally right there with you. Yeah, that is one of the ways that I got in a few bands after I graduated. But then to introduce a new topic, and that is in the orchestra, for example, the symphony orchestra, there are only so many players that they have for percussion or for winds, for example. And it is very hard to get into. It's competitive to audition into. It's difficult music, and you have to be specialized. And there are not that many opportunities outside of institutions. Like, there are not that many community orchestras. Of course, there are some, but a lot of the orchestras, beginner orchestras that you can get into, are sponsored by universities or colleges, and they kind of are an entry point into that sort of world. And in like smaller departments, you don't get that huge 150-piece orchestra with a choir and the kitchen sink and everything. But that's why you go to university, where they have all that, and you can really learn the big scale pieces that they have there and really learn your way. And that's one of the things I aim to do when I went to university, is learn the symphony orchestra very well. and I accomplished that. And I have, I can have it at my whim at this point. But there are a whole bunch of technical details in every single instrument that you just have to, get an entry point in. And so that's one of the big pluses of a big university is you have an orchestra and different ensembles, many different groups of many different types of music. One of the things that we didn't have at Berkeley, though, was a big band, a jazz big band. And so if I'm to go back to school, I would want to go to one with a big band. And yeah, maybe start a Latin music ensemble with salsa and all the percussions and all that.
We have about a minute and a half. Are there any other points? I'm a little biased on this question because I did go to college for, I'm an audio engineer. And it is great because you get access to things that you just can't afford to get access to for a lot of people. I still can't afford like a patch bay and all the kinds of things you can have access to. But I think, you make great points that I, as someone who went to college for it, still Google things for audio engineering. So you never learn everything at school.
Well, what I'll add to kind of challenge you on that is if you would have taken your tuition money, you could have bought all that equipment probably.
Those were loans. Those were loans. So.
Well, yeah, it's not critical that you go to college for it, but it does help in certain career fields and certain tracks. I'm sure that I don't know the stories behind the education background of many of the top artists, hit artists, of pop music, but I'm sure that they didn't go through rigorous musical theory courses that I did, or maybe they did. I mean, I don't want to, but it's not like completely necessary.
Yeah, I had to take audio engineering or music theory as an audio engineer, and I recorded for bands who did not know music theory. So it definitely happens. And there are schools like Berklee College of Music has a reputation for, if you're really good, you go to that school and you don't graduate. Like you get discovered before you even graduate. So it's almost like if you graduate from Berklee College of Music, you're like not as good as the people who flunked out.
The other Berklee, right?
Yeah, the other Berklee, both good schools, but yeah.
You'll find music theory and notation, all this is just a means of communication, basically. And it tells you what's going on at this moment and how things interlock and with itself. So it's communication from artists, composer, musicians, and coordinators, leaders. So that's, my little 2 cents on music theory.
Awesome. Well, very good discussion. Thank you, everyone. So our second to last question here. So this one kind of focuses on a little bit more of the, of course, we're talking about diversity and different perspectives in art as all being people of color, but women in art. Women are often muses. You see lots of painting and sculptures of women in the female form, but especially on the technical side of music, film, art, women tend to be the minority. For the women on the panel, do you feel like you're often the only woman that you're encountering in your field? And even for the men on the panel, how often are you seeing women in band? How often are you seeing women in photography and things like that?
In my personal experience, I feel that we are in a period of time where many changes have happened thanks to all those women that did the hard work for us. Now we have more opportunities and we can feel included. I work as a designer in a company in which all my coworkers are women. And I've been working for this company for about 8 years. So I've been working with creative women for 8 years. And I feel that I got some opportunities and I've been included and invited to participate in many events and things because I'm a woman, and I think there is a great solidarity for women right now.
My perspective again is because I just did things on the Instagram. I feel like I've seen like a good amount of accounts that are from women and men. Like there's a good share, and again, I think it's a platform that's more democratized. So like anybody who just wants to like share their pieces can do that. which I think is good for anybody who's like trying to like get started in any sort of capacity. But I really liked that sort of like space, and I feel like because of these spaces, more folks are willing to kind of like share what art is to them, if that's like sound bites, if that's like some sketch or some like audio visual component. Sorry.
Do you ever feel like you are described as like a woman first and an artist second? I know sometimes I describe myself as an audio engineer, and I get described as a female audio engineer, as if I do different things as an audio engineer being female.
I haven't had to deal with that situation, honestly.
Sorry, I think it depends like what the field, because like okay, like with the drawing and stuff, it was okay, but like for podcasting, maybe like it becomes like, oh, like you're a female podcaster, and not even, why are you saying female? But yeah, I think it depends the spaces that you're in, and how it's been developing. I know podcasting is still like kind of nascent, so it's like predominantly white male. So yeah.
I would imagine that it's a point of marketability and originality, having a different voice in a sea of more uniform voices. You know, people want to hear a female voice or a different, voice or a different perspective. You know. Can I go on? Is that okay? Okay. Well, in the music world, I have been extremely lucky to have worked with very many women artists and musicians. At some point, we had 3 or 4 different females in our percussion section, which in other parts of the country is very male-driven percussion. You know, you're hitting big drums and cymbals and loud things, but no, we had plenty of women in our sections, and I've had female directors, and we've played so many pieces by female composers that are oftentimes separated from their own personal self. So like Sofia Gubaidolina, for example, a French composer who's still alive. We did her works without ever meeting her, for example, and they were beautiful avant-garde new pieces of music with electronics involved with the symphony orchestra. And I mean, there's just the utmost respect, I feel, in this day and age. Now, you look at North Korea, and in their orchestras is completely all men. And I believe that they were asked that, and their answer was because we were emulating the old orchestras of 50, 70 years ago, where it was just men, like the German Philharmonic orchestras, Berlin Philharmoniker, and their sort of their ilk. And they were emulating that. And in those days, it was only the harpist, the one playing the harp, would be the only female of the orchestra. I think that was also with the Beatles. The first Beatles album to have a female musician was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which was in the middle of their career playing the harp. And I don't think that they had many others besides Yoko, actually. Not even in the orchestras that they hired. And this was only 1 or 2 generations ago. But I feel now in this day and age that we have made, fantastic strides in diversifying our orchestras. Nowadays in the Berlin Philharmoniker, we have female musicians. We have in another one of the German orchestras, we have, her name escapes me, Sarah, I believe, and she plays a horn, a French horn. Like in the UCBSO, we also have female French hornists, and it's a much more mixed field at this point. And I feel like moving forward, it should be great if only we can have this more globally, and waiting for this acceptance to spread to other places, I suppose. Oh, not to mention the lead roles in the musical theater and the singers that we have. You could just name off singers, and of course they're at the highest point of their craft. You have to respect that. So yeah, I'll leave the panel open.
Got about 2 more minutes if anyone else has any thoughts.
Did I really speak for like 3 minutes? Jeez.
It's okay.
I'm not too sure, but just like to say, I think it's always important to have like there's representation, but it's also how are you making sure that that's going to be the precedent for future women and girls to come is like how are you exposing like little girls to hey you could be doing your own podcast or you could be doing set design or like not everybody knows that that's a job. You get the usual doctor, lawyer, engineer, tech route. So I think as much as it's important to support the women that are there, it's also important to like showcase it to other people that you can be there. You need to imagine a world with you in it and like things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Something that I also have always kind of noticed is that a lot of professions, when they're unpaid, are very commonly done by women, such as like cooking. That is considered like a woman's job when it's unpaid family housework. But then a lot of owners of restaurants and head chefs are men. Same with, men dominating the charts and being known as guitarists, but, singing can kind of be looked at as like a girl thing or whatever, that not too many men just kind of go around singing, but women will. So again, it's kind of a thing where higher up professions where you're getting paid for it, the more it kind of seems it's a little bit more male dominated. We have about a minute left. Any other thoughts?
I don't know. I kind of want to bring up this musical that was written in Berkeley a few years ago that I was helping with as orchestrator. It was written by my colleague Eleanor Hammond, and so like in the musical royalty, however you get music from money from printed music, you have the composer and then you have the publisher, and of course she's a composer now. So she'd be receiving half of all of the money from that if it ever gains traction, if it ever makes money. And so, yeah, I was totally supporting her all the steps along the way and everything. And I always make a point to help support new compositions and stuff, but it was really special to be working with her.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. For our final question here, we have something I'm sure we'll have a lot of thoughts, but what is the goal with creating art? And is there one? Is there a goal? Are you creating it just to create, to make money, to express yourself, to be therapeutic? What is the goal with creating art?
All in the above. It's self-defined. I mean, if the point of making a song is to attract, a romantic interest, then that's what it is. If it's to make money, then it is what it is. If it's to, show off that you're a genius, then it is what it is. If it's to make something pretty, So, I mean, it's self-defined, in my opinion.
I think when it's in you to make art, any type of art, there's no way around it, You just have to do it because you did it one time and you realize all the satisfaction that you can get out of it. And it just becomes, I wouldn't say an addiction, but it just becomes like something that you always want to go back to it because it's also a great place to find, how do you say refugio?
Refuge.
Yeah, refuge. And I mean, that's what I wanted to say. That once you do it and once you know all the satisfaction that a creation that you did can bring to you, you're just gonna keep going back to that place, And it's always gonna be a different path to it. And that's what makes it interesting and always intriguing,
Absolutely. It's like a modus operandi, like a fish swimming in the water. It's just natural. It's like, to me, I practice for hours a day. It's just natural. It's part of my life, If I didn't have, oh my gosh, in the pandemic when everything shut down and there were no orchestras, my whole schedule fell apart because I'm not in rehearsal, with the orchestra ready to go at this time and all that. So, yeah, I know what you mean.
For me, I feel like it's putting yourself to paper. So like that's a lot of yourself. That's like yeah, your feelings, it's how you feel about that certain day, it's how you feel about that thing. So like I have one art piece that's like a bunch of like little squigglies and whatever, and it's called emotional dumping. It's just whatever you're feeling at that moment and how you want to communicate that to like the rest of the world if maybe you can't communicate that to yourself, or you're searching for a way to do that. But I think that it's like very special and it connects people, and it connects societies, it connects cultures. And I really do think that it should be provided more, like, you know, I don't know, just like more recognition for all the things that it does. I think about food too, like food is also art, the way that you present it and the way that you make it. Um, all of it I think is really important, and self-identity and things like that.
Would you say that the goal of art, to build off of what you said, is communication, perhaps? It like it bridges people together, brings people together, stuff like that. So it could be seen as a form of communication or self-expression, maybe.
Yeah, I see it like that exactly, and that when I look at it in terms of like public diplomacy, it's we think about like sometimes we don't understand each other with words. Even when we're just talking, sometimes we understand each other better through like songs, and sometimes we understand each other better through food. It's the nonverbal things that I think create the most change, and that's why I think art is so important. But at the same time, like why it's not like put on the back burner, like people aren't like being receiving retribution for whatever they're putting out. But it's very personal. I think it's very personal, and it can be connected to like your culture and all these like things. Yeah.
I think that's what's really special about art is to like get a sensation of something in such an unconventional way, you know.
I also think that it documents like a certain period of time. Like, for example, we are currently working with plastics, which is like problematic right now. So through the years, it will show that we were dealing with that at this period of time.
It becomes like a testimony of a certain period, you know.
I would say it's like the fruits of a civilization or something. To put it, you know, artsy, you know.
Sometimes I can, yeah, it can just be a reaction to the point in time. Like, I'm sorry if I don't remember the periods, but like Dadaism, like being a reaction to like all this war and things like that. Like, it's also like maybe sometimes people can't even express what they're experiencing like during the war, but still there are these people that are able to look at it and express it, and then like preserve that sort of memory in time in that art piece so other generations can look at it. So I think that's incredibly powerful, that they just thought something in the moment and it represented a time that now we can see it everlasting in the art piece.
Yes, I totally agree with what you both are saying about it capturing a certain period. And that is one of the challenges that I find in my own art. And for example, this opera takes place in the height of the Incan Empire. And I want to like portray something that is historically accurate and all that. And so I'm like looking back in time and trying to do my research about all these different things and stuff. Another goal with creating art, I mean, it's also a display of culture, you know, that also goes along with the historical period side of things. Expressing heritage, remembering the stories of, you know, ancients or new stories to come and resonate with us these days, etc. I always think it's funny to bring the communication thing back into it. When people say that music is a way of communicating, I went to a small seminar about that, and they said you can't make a question with music, exactly, like a proposition, like, do you want to go to lunch with me at 7:30 at Ipudo's in Berkeley, you know, for example. You can't do that in music, but you can communicate other things without it, that transcend language, you know. So, you know, it's a give or take in this analogy.
That's very true about communication now with music. You can, without knowing any theory, you can know when you hear a sad song, even if you don't know the lyrics. You know when you hear a happy song and you don't know anything about minor keys or major keys, but you know this sounds sad, this sounds happy, it sounds like someone's having a good time, and you don't need to know, be able to understand anything else. So yeah, I think communication is totally transcends language and culture.
And same with the visual arts too. It also translates there too. Of course, you can always have the obfuscation, to use that word, of the medium, and have something that's totally abstract and see what people can get from that too. That's also fun in a way, challenging in a different way.
Kind of expanding on that idea, related to this idea of goal with art. Do you ever sort of like feel either not like misunderstood when your goal is misinterpreted? So for example, if someone's looking at your, you know, your art and they have a totally different idea of what you were going for with that, do you feel any type of way, or is it okay for your art to be open to interpretation?
I think that's like the best part. I think the fact, especially when it's people that know you, like I love looking at my friends' art, people that I really know them and their personalities, because there's so much subconscious that goes into the art that the artist itself cannot even see it. You know what I mean? Even though they painted it, even though they put it up in whatever it is that they're doing, but you're their friend and you are detached of the whole process of the making of the work, then you can see it so clearly. Like I see so many things in my friends' work that they don't even see it, and I can see how well they go with their personality, or how are certain things that are so inherently of them that they are representing there that it might not be as clear for them. And then also, if it's just somebody that doesn't know you and they interpret whatever it is that you did in a completely different way, I think that's like the richness of art. You know, it's the fact that is you, and you might interpret a piece of art in a certain way today, and if you look at it 5 years from today, because you have changed, it will be completely different, you know.
Xavier, any comments?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about like with art as communication. It can communicate ideas, but I think it's more about the expression that's like not tied to someone necessarily understanding it. And I was kind of thinking of it like a dog barking. That's the dog expressing themselves, but you don't necessarily know what they're saying. You can kind of pick up on context clues, and you can figure out a general idea of what they're trying to say, but you can't get the exact idea. And with the exception of like maybe say like lyrical music or creative writing, and even in that, sometimes it's open to interpretation. But especially with the visual arts, it's really hard to know exactly what that artist was going for. In the same way that a dog bark, you don't know exactly what they're trying to say, but you can kind of arrive close to it. So I don't really remember why I was making that point, but that was something that came to mind. And then with the original question of just the goal of art, for me, it is, that was my reason. So it was really that expression. It's not about communicating something and necessarily be understood, but it's just more about the expressing and kind of bringing that vision to life. So if you look at like the photograph that you had shown of like my friend skateboarding, and I had taken that picture, like I visualized that because it was giving you the impression of what it would look like to stand up at the top of that and to imagine yourself going down it, as opposed to like if I would have taken the picture from the bottom where maybe you would look taller, but you would have no idea of what was going through his mind when he decided that he was going to go for that trick at that spot, and the fear that might go into that. So that's what I was trying to capture with that. Whether or not somebody got that, it's not really my concern. It's just more about what I wanted to go for out of it. So that's my piece.
That kind of reminds me of a certain orchestral piece, and I know I'm bringing up a lot of orchestra stuff, but that's kind of what I've been studying, by Sir Edward Elgar, and it's called the Enigma Variations. And it's like it's a tune, and then he makes a variation and variations of that tune, and each one has like an abbreviation, like initials, and they were each to his friends, his musical friends or whatever, and each one of them would have a different personality or something like that. And what really got me was a dog, because in one movement he like makes a variation based off of a dog and is really excited and really fast and all that. And then another movement he like depicts an ocean, a barge, and like you put coins on a drum and then you do a slow roll. And then the slowest and most sultry of the movements is dedicated to his wife, and there are just a whole bunch of different things about it. And it's kind of that interpretation that really sparked that thought with me, because you can play the music and it'll be fine, but if you play the music and do your research and know exactly what the composer was thinking of at the moment, then you can get a whole nother degree of musicality into it, and you could see the dog and you can hear the ocean and all that sort of stuff, versus just playing it as is, point blank. So yeah, that kind of just sparked in my mind when you said that.
I wanted to offer like another perspective too. I don't know, like being devil's advocate, but like art can also be used in like various ways. It can be used as propaganda, and how we like have to be mindful of that, especially when we're in an age of like disinformation, to make sure that like things are like very much aesthetically curated to make sure that they look legitimate and stuff like that, but making sure that like we're keeping on top of things. And it just brings to mind like maybe propaganda leaf pamphlets during 1940s, and of course going on right now in different places around the world. But just also saying how art can be used for good, as it can also be used to like divest interest or like make people think in other ways, and just proselytize whatever sort of ideologies that are more conservative.
Absolutely, such as the music of Richard Wagner, or as I'll call him, Richard Wagner. It was pre-Nazi Germany, and like that music was played at the Nuremberg rallies to think that people have the superiority of this finely composed music and all that. Now, with the orchestra music, I'm not a European. It's not really my culture, but what do I get from it? The point of me doing this art is so that I can learn the tools of how this orchestra works, and so that I could create from new. I can get like my standard bearings, like the standardization of all this stuff. So just those two little tidbits, I guess. But yeah, totally agree. Especially with like cyber art these days, you can do so many different digital arts and humanities sorts of things. You can make robots or chatbots that spew things, good or bad, and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, no, yeah, I just agree with that exactly. Like being careful also of like the way that we use art, or not that we use art, but just seeing the different ways that it can be used. Yeah.
Awesome. Really, really great points, everyone. That was our final question. If anyone has any last thoughts, if any of our audience members have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or if you want to send them in the chat, and I'll give a minute if anyone has any thoughts they want to compose.
Oh, actually, I had one more thing to add on that last bit, and it's the purpose of this project in the opera in Quechua. And it is kind of an indigenous sentiment that I personally have. I want to bring forth to the world this language that is, not so prevalent. It's the indigenous language of the Americas with the most speakers, Quechua. It has like millions of speakers or something. And it has its moments in Star Wars with Quechua gibberish. And then in the Dora the Explorer live action movie, there was actually intelligible Quechua in there. But I also want to bring it to the orchestral world and give it the orchestral treatment with the orchestra and the singers and the stage and everything. And so I want to put it on that pedestal and bring it to the forefront to the world, because I think that there's some anti-indigenous sentiments in South America, and I really want to combat that and bring it to the forefront. So Yeah, just to close off that little bit, I wanted to bring that in there. And it also ties in with the Latina sort of theme that we have going on. So, yeah. Enough of me.
Any questions from our audience?
The audience is nice and relaxed. We're all chilling, having a good time.
I'll just make a comment that this has been very enlightening and entertaining. So thank you all for doing this.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Well, if there are no questions, looks like we're ending right on time, which is very rare for a virtual program to end on time. Any last thoughts or comments from our panel?
Thank you for putting this together, Antonia. It's great to hear everybody's perspective, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much for
Thank you
having
so
us.
much.
And it was nice to get to meet you all and to hear you talking and to hear your perspective and your perception of things. And it was very enlightening, as she was saying.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we can all get together in real life and have a dinner or something, or go to a show. It'd be very cool.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone. I've enjoyed myself. It was great hearing from everyone. And thank you, Anna, for putting this on.
Thank you, everyone. Well, have a great night or afternoon if you're in California. And thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Anna.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank
Bye,
you. Great
take care.
job.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
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 Anna, I'm going to hop off and close over at Central, but great job. It was really great.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.